And welcome to Bayou Time. I'm Martin False. We have the Speaker Pro Temp with us today, Mr. Tanner Magee. And Tanner, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on, Martin. Always enjoy it.
Well, and I was following the session, and it's never really easy in a session. And this one, I guess, was not easy either. But just take us through a little synopsis. Overall, we did well for this area, but it's not without traveling over a few road bumps, is it?
Absolutely. I mean, look, it's a fiscal only session, which means we only had 5 general bills. It also means it's shortened by 2 months, which means everything's moving at like a breakneck pace. I mean, it's really fast. And then it's the end of a term, so you have everybody's starting to campaign mode, and things have kind of changed. So these are always a recipe for a tough session. But overall, it was a good session. You don't want to lose sort of the more ugly side of it to what was the positives. And look, just outside this area, teachers got a pay raise, which is the 3rd time this term, brings a total pay raise of $5,000 since this term began to the teachers. Law enforcement, through their supplemental fund, got a pay raise. We put extra money towards coastal restoration. We put more money towards early childhood education. There was a lot of great things that came out of this session. And then locally, we did very well as far as projects and money being spent down here. We brought back a lot of money for the 2nd or 3rd year in a row. In fact, I think over the last 8 years, no parish had more money spent in it by the state than Terrebonne.
Mm-hmm. And, we've been following that, and that is kudos to our delegation. Let me ask you this. When you're sort of in charge of and in the hierarchy of the legislation, you're seeing all this bannering going on. First of all, you're probably used to it. You're an attorney. You see that in the courtroom all the time. So
I'm more used to it with my triplet daughters than I am as an attorney. But
that's a great point.
Yes, I am used to it.
Yeah, you're surrounded by 4.
Yes, exactly.
I'm just kidding out there. All right. So anyway, you see this. Explain to the audience, because we've been getting a lot of monies outside, from IDA and probably COVID and everything else, but doesn't it create a false ceiling? So a lot of people get attached to that budget, which is no longer going to be around. So a lot of y'all are trying to build a budget based on without it.
That's absolutely right.
But a lot of people get married to that, don't they?
That's right. And so post-COVID, post-IDA, you're seeing a lot of revenue, and the economy is doing very well too. I mean, it's 3 factors altogether have produced a lot more additional revenue than the state normally has. If you look at, it's about $11.9 billion came in for state revenue. We're typically more in the 8 to 9 range of money, more towards the 8. So you had was $2 to $3 billion extra that we don't normally have. But that's not permanent. We know that money is going to go back down. We saw it after Katrina, which led to all the budget struggles in the state afterwards. They cut taxes after Katrina, and then we didn't have enough money to pay for our higher education and our health care. It's basically what happened. So we want to make sure that we don't go spend a bunch of money that we can't really afford, is really kind of where we are. So the idea is, what do you do with that money? Well, we put the money into the budget stabilization fund, which when I got to the legislature didn't exist, and now it's at $1.7 billion. Put in the rainy day fund, which when I got to the legislature, it was down to like $300 million. It's back up to $1.3 billion. Both are at the highest points in the state history. Additionally, we still had extra money. So then what do you do with that money? Well, we thought the best investment was to put it into infrastructure. And so we did a lot of big budget projects across the state, all the way from, Fouchon to Shreveport, and small projects too. So it was a big range of money, because that way, once you spend the money in the infrastructure, you're not married to it. Once those projects ends and the money's spent, you're not tied to paying it for forever.
And didn't y'all have to put it on infrastructure? As well, we brought up roads before and bridges around here, and it's been on your radar, but this was a chance for y'all to put money towards that. And if you don't, your constituents will be dialing you up pretty good.
We have $14 billion backlog of projects, and you see it every day on social media, constituents and people complaining about roads, and they're horrible. So this was an opportunity for us to at least make a lick on that $14 billion backlog. We didn't solve it all overnight, but it's the first time we probably decreased the backlog in at least 20 years.
Educate, we'll start in this segment. We'll bring it to the next one, but just for people who aren't real educated on the process, and I'm not in Baton Rouge a lot either, so you educated me at the same time. Where does the tension come from How hard is it to get past that? I was reading about conspiracy theories and all that. Everything now in the whole world is a conspiracy theory.
Absolutely. And look, we have 105 members of the House and 39 members of the Senate. If you try to get 140 people to pick a movie, it's difficult to do, let alone do an entire budgeting process. But the problem is, you try to explain to younger members, newer members, or maybe members who are not as engaged as they should be, the process. And they want to believe there's an alternative to what you're trying to say, that there's, three elves in the back closet who have a secret plan on the budget instead of what is obvious and before their eyes and what you're trying to tell them about. And so it's very difficult as you move through that budgeting process, because the House has to dance with the Senate, and then the House and the Senate have to dance with the governor, and the House has to dance with its own members in between, and the Senate has to deal with. There's a lot of moving parts to all that, and to get all this done in 2 months is a lot easier said than done. And people want to, if something gets delayed, they think it's on purpose, that you're withholding something because of some nefarious reason. Well, no, it takes staffers hours, days even, to draft a 600-page amendment set on a budget that's that big.
Let's do this. We're going to take a short break here once again with the Pro Temp, Tanner Magee. We'll talk more about the session. We'll let him go more in detail. He always spends a good amount of time with us, so we'll let him educate us along the way. We'll be right back. Don't go away. Today's social media segment is brought to you by South Louisiana Bank. It's better when we bank together. Waits and Downer, attorneys at law. Terrebonne Ford, built Ford tough. All right, welcome back. As once again, State Representative Tanner Magee is with us, the Pro Temp. And, we're talking about this session. And over the years, it's not uncommon. We've had some doozies. When you were a small child and I was interviewing people, they would come in here and it got close to fisticuffs and everything else. But I saw this described as mayhem of retaliation, budget mishaps, and name calling. Did it really get that bad?
I think, unfortunately, it's always sort of like that. But I think being in an election year, some people wanted to use the opportunity to make more out of kind of the behind the scenes stuff, the normal. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's like that a lot. And I don't think I think retaliation is a bad word. I think if you did not want to have infrastructure projects and you didn't vote for those things, then the general consensus was, we weren't going to do them in your area. We're going to do it for the people who wanted to have the infrastructure. It only makes sense. And so I think that's not retaliation. That's just kind of the way it is. That's the way it always has been. I remember when I first got there, a senator telling me a story that he didn't want to renew a tax, and then he wanted Governor Foster to build a road. And Governor Foster said, the state's a bank. You got to put money into the bank to withdraw from the bank. And so he learned his lesson pretty quickly, and he renewed the tax so that he could get the road in his district. It's kind of the similar thing, is that, if you want to spend money on infrastructure, you're going to have to vote for it. And I think that's what we saw. The name calling, stuff like that, I never saw it got to that loud. There's some heated moments because it's a 2-month session. Everything's moving fast. People are frustrated. People are nervous. They're trying to get things done. You don't want to go into a special because there's all kind of, first of all, they're expensive. Second of all, it would make the budget vote to 3/4, which means it was probably impossible. And it would really make the extremes in charge of the budget at that point. So nobody wanted to go to a special session. So all those nerves are frayed. And then it's the end of a term and everybody's on their way out. You have a lame duck governor, you have a lame duck speaker, you have a lame duck Senate president. It's a lot of tensions going on at one time.
When we talk about capital outlay, and in a while, I want you to talk about what we got for this area, but and certain people posturing to be conservative with capital outlay, but not realizing that people put you in office to bring money home, bring the bacon home to where you live. And we see that. But in the line item veto and the governor's power, that's why the governor of Louisiana is so powerful. How was the governor in this situation? Was he present? Was he dominant? Was he behind the scenes? What was he?
Yeah, that's a great point. And look, I tell people all the time, I wish I had the luxury of being a Northeast Louisiana legislator who didn't have to worry about capital outlay. But we got so many great needs, particularly on the coastal restoration levee building down here, that I just don't have the luxury to take such a stance. The governor himself was, excuse me, Martin, was kind of took a backseat this session. I think he knew there was a ton of money to be spent. He really didn't involve himself. He had some bright lines of what he wanted that were no stars if you do it. Early child education, he wanted $50 million. He really only got 42, I think. So he had to compromise there. But other than that, he stayed out the back, knowing that there was so much money that I don't think he really had to have a heavy hand.
Well, if the governor doesn't get involved in education, he's got to go home to his wife.
Absolutely.
So he's got to be smart, right?
Correct. And look,
it is a lot of give and take.
It's a lot of give and take. And early childhood education is something that, if you look at the research, it's been bipartisan throughout the years. And the reason why is because the research shows the earlier you start educating a child, the better outcomes you get. It's not rocket science and not complicated. So that we know that if we can spend some money in those areas, we'll get a really good return of investment. That's why it's always been bipartisan. So it wasn't really a hill to die on as far as that goes. Teacher pay raises are also very important to the governor. He ran on that, getting us to the Southern average. Although I will say, and some teachers might be mad at me, both my parents are teachers, the Southern average is sort of inflated because it has Delaware and Maryland in it, which I don't think very many people think of that as being the southern states. And Maryland's like the second highest teacher salaries in the country. If you actually pull back just to SEC, which people think about, like the SEC schools, actually we're ahead of that average. So, I mean, we're not as bleak as sometimes that picture is painted.
But I'm sure you and I mean, I've got 3 siblings that are school teachers. I wish we could pay them $150,000 a year.
Yeah, absolutely. There's not enough that we can pay them.
And police too.
And police too. That's why the 2 things we did this year were teacher pay raises and law enforcement pay raises. I mean, I think those were our 2 biggest teacher drives. Unfortunately, to give a modest pay raise, it sounds easy. It's $290 million to give a $2,000 pay raise. It's a lot of money. There's a lot of teachers out there, so it's not as easy as said as done.
What happens in these I know legislation or legislators posture themselves on being adults most of the time. But don't you see sometimes where they really just sort of lose their identity and it just becomes a free-for-all? And then you got to, as a pro temp and other people, you got to sort of rally everybody back together. It becomes difficult, doesn't it?
Very difficult. They get caught in the moment and they have forces pushing them to one side or the other. And, it's sort of, they also, I think, want to be branded a certain way, and so they start acting a certain way, and then they see they get rewarded for acting kind of like sometimes the misbehaving child in school gets rewarded by getting attention, and so he keeps the attention-seeking behavior out. I see a lot of politicians do that, to be honest with you, and a lot of the better ones who don't seek out attention are really the good ones who are doing a lot of good work for the people. And I got to try and bring everybody to the table and get everybody together in a room and make sure we can find some common ground.
You have a psychology background?
I do, actually, yes.
All right, there you go. Well, that works out well.
It does, absolutely.
All right, we're going to take a break. We'll come back. I'll ask our representative a few more items. We have one more segment. It's important that you know what's going on, and we'll be right back. Don't go away. Today's social media segment is brought to you by Alford and Associates for all of your insurance needs. CIS, Cardiovascular Institute of the South, the highest quality cardiovascular care available. Barker Honda, the Barker family tradition of quality. All right, welcome back as we continue our discussion with Tanner Magee, and we're talking about the legislation. My phone started ringing on the vape issue, and I'm never an advocate of anybody doing something that's going to harm their body, but I guess they made some good points when you're talking about vaping compared to cigarettes. I think we'd all agree with vaping's probably knocking cigarette sales
Oh,
down
absolutely.
quite a bit. But that was a tough issue too, wasn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, what you've seen over the years is the cigarette market almost going away, and the vaping market taking off. And so, as a state, you sort of have a new product that hasn't been regulated like cigarettes have been traditionally regulated, and it's trying to figure out how do you handle this new thing on the marketplace and how do you regulate it. And you have a lot of people coming from kind of a lot of different areas. And one of the things they wanted to do is they wanted to establish a tax on the vape products that at least mirrored what you had on the cigarette side, and they wanted to dedicate that money to law enforcement. And so that kind of had that going on. And then you had to make sure you had enough money from the tax on the vape products to pay for the law enforcement pay raises. And then you also wanted to a whole issue about flavors. And this became really what the whole entire bill was about. They come in a variety of flavors. There's an argument that some of the flavors are designed to attract children to the market. Some people are like, well, I just like strawberry. Why can't I have strawberry flavored? I mean, it tastes better than cigarette flavored. So you get into all these issues, and it's a lot to learn and get to up speed upon because I don't vape. I don't own a vape shop, and I don't really, so I have to kind of figure all this stuff out on the fly in a 2-month process. I think where we landed up was allowing some flavors to stay, but trying to get rid of some of the more aggressively children targeted, watermelon and bubblegum flavors.
And there's a catch-22 there because in talking with some of the owners, and I'm sure you would agree, we went through it with cigarettes in some of the convenience stores a while back when we had all this synthetic marijuana and everything going on, and people were bringing in cigarettes on the black market, and they were getting them out to people. Vaping could be pretty similar, so it's a slippery slope.
Yeah, I mean, you always trying to walk this fine line of you don't want to put a product where you feel like you create a black market for it, where people don't know what they're getting. They don't have any trust that what's in the label is what it is. The more, regulated, but yet you allow enough of it so that the good players, quote unquote, are involved in the scene, which, at least what you're buying is what you're getting. The consumer can have some faith and trust, because like right now you got a concern of fentanyl being in almost anything. I mean, it's it's a drug that's easily concealed into a bunch of different products. And so, now I'm not saying you're getting fentanyl in your vape
but
products.
If that comes from the black market, you don't know.
But you don't know what you're getting. Exactly. And so having stuff that's coming from reliable wholesalers, reliable manufacturers, and you know exactly what's in the product is something you want to make sure you keep, and you want to keep at a price point where you don't drive people to these black markets to get these cartridges they found on some website, and they just buy it, it gets delivered to their house.
And I guess you have to look, I'm sure, was that something you got a lot of calls on?
I did, actually, a lot of emails too.
Yeah.
That was a very much email driven one. A lot of comments on social media as well. And you get some pretty wild comments these days.
But were you able to sort of work it out with?
Yeah, I think where we landed was probably, I think maybe not everybody's happy, but they can live with it at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I guess that's always the thing, because I think that some of the points that we're making to me is that some of the, and we always talk about lobbyists, but some of the lobbyists for these bigger conglomerates, I guess, will sort of control it. So I guess as a speaker too, you always have to look at how's it going to lay out fairly across the board.
Right. And look, that's one of the things I don't have the luxury anymore, because I used to be able to vote yes or no for something. Do I like it? Do I not like it? That's really not my job or role anymore. Now I'm more involved in how do we plan out these things. And what I mean by that, just the structure of the whole entire session, and bigger negotiations over all kinds of different stuff. It's a much different vantage point from that side of it than just be like, I don't like that. No, it's much easier to do that situation, but I have to talk to both sides, have everybody come, and then also bear the brunt of everybody thinking that I had a hand in everything.
Yeah, you're the referee.
Yeah, exactly.
You ever thought you'd be a referee?
No, not at all.
Referee, psychologist,
Yes.
lawyer, a little bit every. So what do we get out of how well did Terrebonne and Lafourche do?
They did excellent. We actually, I think for the second year in a row, outside of Lafayette, probably had the most money in the state. We've done better than New Orleans the last 2 years, as far as spending money. And what's that on? That's everything from miter gates to locks. I mean, some really big ticket items that the state's been trying to do for a very long time. Money for roads, money for. Bice Sportsplex is getting another $4.9 million injection into it to try and do some more projects. So we're trying to do some stuff to move this parish a little bit further along.
Well, I know y'all have done well for the local area, so I want to thank you. And I know you've been helping lead that charge with a lot of our other delegation. We'll try to get them on too. But, thank you for joining us. Anything you want to leave the people with the last minute? You got the floor.
Yeah, no, look, you never get everything you want, and I don't get everything I want. It's a process. Sometimes it's an ugly process, but at the end of the day, I think the budget and everything that we did really does benefit the state and puts it in a position where it hasn't been in a very, very long time, which is we have a lot of money in reserves. We paid off, we didn't even bring it up, we paid off $700 million in lasers debt. With this bill, that's on the principle we can pay off lasers within 1 year now. We put in reach of paying off that debt. That's something if you would have told me 5 years ago would have seemed impossible.
If we could just get the federal government to think that way, we'd be all right.
Exactly. So we did a lot of good things, a lot of very conservative budgeting principle things, but also address some really big needs.
Real quick, 15 seconds, were the parish presidents happy?
Yes.
Well, that's good.
Yes. All of them are happy.
All right. Thank you. We appreciate it, Tanner. And once again, we appreciate you out there joining us. A little more clarity on the legislative session. We'll have more.